Welcome to the fourth and final video on Phaedo Part 2. In this video, I'm going to be discussing Simmias's harmony objection to the affinity argument. So Simmias gives his objection to the affinity argument at 85e to 86e. And the passage that I have in mind is sort of one long paragraph that begins in this way. And it goes on, as it seems to me, he said, one might make the same argument about harmony, lyre and strings, that a harmony is something invisible, without body, beautiful and divine, in the attuned lyre. Whereas the lyre, the instrument itself, and its strings are physical, bodily, composite, earthly, and akin to what is mortal. So what's Simmias doing here? Well, he's saying, look, the harmony is kind of like the forms, and the lyre is kind of like particular things, right? I mean, the harmony is also going to be invisible. There's also something divine about it because it's beautiful, whereas the lyre itself is going to be physical. Just like particular things. It's composite, just like particular things. It's earthly, it's akin to what is mortal. And so he says, okay, I mean, given those comparisons, well, it seems like the soul is invisible, and so it can be compared to the harmony just as much as it could be compared to the forms. So it seems like an equally legitimate analogy is going to be between the soul and its tuning or its harmony and the body and its lyre, right? That's equally legitimate to the comparison between the soul and the body and the forms and particular things, Simmias thinks. But if the comparison between the harmony and the lyre is equally legitimate as the comparison between the soul and the body and the forms and the particular things. So if we could substitute in the analogy with equal justification the tuning and the lyre for the forms and the particular things, well, then we would get this analogy, not the one between the forms and the particular things. And if this were the analogy, well, then the soul wouldn't be immortal. Why? Think about it. Pause the video. Well, if this were the comparison that were relevant and not to the forms, well, then instead of the forms being the relevant item that's like the soul, the tuning or the harmony would be like the soul. But the soul would then just be, if the soul were like a harmony, then the soul would just be a certain harmony among the parts of the body. And so the soul would depend on the body. After all, if there were no harmony among the parts of the body, if there were no parts of the body, right, if the body didn't exist, well, then there would be no harmony among the parts of the body, right? So the harmony depends on there being parts of the body. But if the body ceased to exist and stopped having a harmony among its parts, well, then the harmony would die. The harmony would disappear. And so the soul would disappear, right? So just as if you destroyed the lyre and the lyre ceased to exist, just as how if you destroy the liar and cease to exist, the harmony would cease to exist. Similarly, if the soul is just a kind of harmony among the parts of the body, then if you destroyed the body, the soul would cease to exist. And so the soul wouldn't be immortal. Right? And another way that Simmias goes on to make this analogy is sort of more general, right? So here we're using the example of the lyre and its tuning or its harmony, but you can make it more generally between the materials mixed and the mixture, right? I mean, the mixture itself is going to be invisible. Maybe it's not quite as good as a harmony because there's nothing divine about it. It's not beautiful necessarily. But if the soul were like a mixture of the parts of the body, well, then the soul would depend on the body and it wouldn't be immortal. Okay, so what I'm going to ask you in class, let me erase this. What I'm going to ask you in class is about the three objections to Simmias' argument. So what I'm going to want to talk through together is the next section of the handout. There we go. So if we scroll down here, right, there's these replies to Simmias' objection. And in class on Thursday, I want to talk about these before moving on to Katie's objection. Okay, so think hard about these replies and why Simmias' theory would conflict with the recollection theory, why it's a problem that the soul directs the body, not the body the soul, and why the harmony theory will have trouble accommodating virtue and vice. And in addition, think about how Simmias could respond. So I'm going to ask you all of these questions on Thursday. How each of these three are working and how Simmias could respond. All right. I will see you in Phaedo Part 3.